Hello, humanoids. Halfling Hannah here from halflinghobbies.com. Who doesn't love a familiar, a little squishy spirit animal friend that can scout for you, that can spy for you, that can go and distract enemies for you? Who doesn't love that? DMs, that's who. If you're sick and tired of your wizard's familiar, do I have a video for you. Here we go. Alright friends, let's talk about familiars. Now Find Familiar is a spell that wizards get fairly early on. It's a level 1 conjuration spell. This spell allows wizards to be able to summon a spirit from another plane and bind it into an animal form, creating a little furry companion, or scaly companion, or slimy companion, depending on which one they choose. You see, they get some options. They can choose a cat, a bat, an octopus, a fish, a bird. There's lots of different kinds of animal forms that this familiar can take. But regardless of what form it is a spirit that is either celestial, fae, or fiend, depending on what the wizard wants. Now this spirit comes in animal forms and has to obey everything that the wizard commands it to do. And DMs hate them. When your wizard summons Find Familiar for the very first time, likely you have the same reaction I do.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
We just don't like them. And there's some reasons for that, but first let's talk about the difference between familiars and animal companions. For this, we're going to need a helpful chart. So, animal companions, here's what they can do. They are an actual animal. If they fall to 0 hit points, they die, just like a character would die. They can attack enemies. They have their own initiative turn, and they do what their master commands them to do, but they don't have to. They have sort of their own kind of free will, and the DM can play with that a little bit depending on animal handling checks, the bond between them, and all that kind of thing. So that is an animal companion. A familiar is quite a bit different. A familiar is a spirit in animal form. It is not an actual animal. If a familiar falls to 0 hit points, it just kind of disappears until the wizard summons it again. A familiar cannot make an attack on an enemy, but it can cast spells. That is, the wizard can cast spells through its familiar. And the familiar takes its reaction to cast that spell when the wizard takes the action to cast it. Familiars also move on their own initiative turn, and, well, they have to do whatever the wizard commands. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They simply do what it commands, and that's one of the reasons why DMs don't like them. So let's get into that. Why do DMs hate familiars as much as we do? Well, reason number 1 is they are boring. Familiars show up, do what the wizard wants them to do, and then they kind of disappear for the role-playing part of the campaign. You don't really have anything to do with them other than maybe that they're always on the wizard's shoulder for flavor. They don't have a personality, they aren't interesting, they're almost like little spiritual robots doing what they're commanded to do, ruining all of our planning and going on with their little lives, which leads me to reason 2 why DMs hate familiars, is they ruin everything. My familiar is going insane right now. Hold on just a second. Pipsqueak! Pipsqueak! Can you stop literally climbing the walls? That'd be great. You spend all of this time creating this amazing dungeon with all of these surprises and rooms and side things in it, and you expect your party to dive through this dungeon, to really crawl through it, to turn these corners and be surprised by these different things. And then you have your wizard who says, I send my familiar down every single hallway for 300 feet. What does it see? It sees the end of this campaign because I'm done. That's what it sees. Now, of course, that's an exaggeration, and as a DM, if you have a wizard who has a familiar, you have to be ready for these eventualities. Maybe you end up having spellcasters who have invisibility or some magical means of hiding things that you don't want the familiar to find until the party gets there. Regardless, though, that requires a lot more planning on our end, and it becomes a lot harder to surprise the party, good or bad, when there's a familiar around. So, DMs, here's the thing. We can't get rid of familiars. They're here to stay. And it's likely your wizard is very attached to their familiar, and your party loves having their own little scout and spy to go and look around before they plunge headfirst into your dungeon. So we have to come up with a way to love those little guys however we can. So I've come up with some ideas. Try incorporating these into your campaign if you have a familiar, and tell me if it helps or if you still hate them. Also, I'd love to know, what do you think of familiars? Are they a great use in your campaign, or can you absolutely not stand them? Please leave a comment down below to let me know your thoughts on familiars. Alright, so here's how we can spice up familiars, DM. You ready? My first suggestion is maybe a little tricky, but I love it. So, when your wizard casts Find Familiar for the first time, if they haven't already, I like to have their familiar be a little bit random. Here's the thing, they are spirits. These spirits come from different planes, and it makes perfect sense that they would have a personality. They don't have to be little spiritual robots. They can have their own personality. So I like to have a sheet, and if you would like this, I have it in the description below. But I have a sheet of 6 to 12 different personality traits that a familiar might have. And when the wizard summons their familiar for the first time, I roll that dice and I see what kind of familiar they're going to get. Now you can have these based on also the plane that these are coming from, so celestial, fae, or fiend. So, for example, an option that a wizard might get if they cast Find Familiar on my little sheet is they might get a super clingy familiar that has to be near them at all times. Or they might get kind of a jerk familiar who really doesn't like being on this plane of existence and will do everything the wizard commands it to because it has to, but only to the very letter of what it is told to do. Meaning the wizard has to give out these extremely extravagant and long commands to the familiar to get it to do what they want. Otherwise, it'll find a way to kind of Amelia Bedelia the whole situation. And if you're young and you don't know what Amelia Bedelia is, I'm so sorry. But it just finds a way to mess everything up as much as it can because it's a jerk. So if you would like that little card, make sure that you go to the description and you can download it there. Another way that you can make familiars a little more interesting is to treat them like NPCs. In the same way that NPCs have their own thoughts and feelings about things, familiars can be the same way. And you, as the DM, can kind of bring that personality to life. No, they can't talk or anything like that, but it doesn't mean that they can't express excitement or disgust. If you have a celestial familiar, that maybe they hate it when the party does anything even remotely shady, and they will just give this stare, this judgmental stare to them anytime they do it. Or maybe you have a fae familiar who loves playing tricks, and when it's not commanded to do something else, will kind of sneak off from the party to play some pranks. This can lead to some interesting situations when the familiar comes running back to the wizard with an angry mob behind them. Use familiars to create different situations within your world, just like you would an NPC. It makes them far more enjoyable. Now, if your wizard hates their familiar, well, the spell says that they can dismiss them permanently, meaning they can recast the spell to try and find another familiar, at which point you do the same thing all over again, just a little bit differently. This can create a far more interesting and enjoyable experience for everyone, turning a familiar from something that DMs hate and can't stand to an essential part of your storytelling. Well, I hope this helps, and I'm sorry if you hate familiars. I feel your pain, but there are some ways that we can make them just a little more lovable. Remember, it's good luck to like a Halfling video or subscribe to a Halfling channel, so please make sure that you do both. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and I would love it if you were part of that journey with me. Well, until next time, may your game have advantage, my friends. Halfling Hannah here, signing out. Are you a fiend? Huh? Is that what kind you are? What's out there? Is there birds out there? We'll go see them in a minute. Who's my little familiar? Can I have a kiss? Kiss, kiss. Kiss, kiss. Mwah.